Chapter 6. The Sea. The journey east to the sea took half a moon. Vorka notched the days on the bone amulet he was making. It was a flattish blade bone with a hole bored at the narrow end. Vorka threaded it on a leather strip and wore it around his neck, and whenever they stopped for a few days, he would take it off and add a few more symbols of their journey. Scratched outlines of a hare, a spear, and a wild dog. Wavy lines for rivers, a deer's head looking backward over its shoulder. They were crossing the lower slopes of a great mountain range, much higher than the mountains above the winter caves. Perpetual snow covered the heights. Maroo knew this range as the summer mountains because the deer sought out these high, cold pastures in summer. As they climbed higher, the land became more arid. Trees for firewood were scarce, but the people knew where to find the clumps of stunted birch and willow that grew in sheltered crevices. Tikek was getting big. She wanted to reach the seashore and have the baby there, but she had to stop and rest more often now, and the other adults began to wonder if it was too far to go. Maroo liked to put her hand on her mother's belly and feel the baby kicking. "It wants to be born," she said, but Tikek said, "Not yet." For several days they camped in the mountains at a place where clear, cold water sprang from the heart of the rock and went leaping down to the plain. There was a river nearby where the fish were so plentiful that Maroo and Otak could catch them in their hands. And although Maroo was still dressed in her furs, she also wore garlands of the white and purple saxifrage flowers that grew all over the mountain. When they left the mountain camp, they began to climb slowly but steadily downhill every day. Sylvie and Areg and Old Mother knew this trail, but to the others it was new. One morning, when an east wind was blowing, Maroo woke and was aware of a strange smell, far away still, but unlike anything she had smelled before. There was salt in it, and the other scents she could not define. Old Mother, who was heating stones in the fire, smiled as she saw Maroo examining the air. "It is the sea," she said. A few days later, Maroo saw for the first time the things she had smelled. They came to a gap between two hills, and looking down, instead of the expected green plain, they saw a gray expanse of water that stretched forever. Only this water was not flat and clear like a lake, but constantly moving and dimpling with flashes of light and changing color, gray and green and violet. The distant, tantalizing smell now surrounded them, telling Maroo of salt, seaweed, fish, and all the creatures that lived in the sea. They climbed down to the white sandy beach, disturbing colonies of gulls that flew upward, screaming. The children had never seen sand before. They dug holes, drew lines, piled it up, and rolled in it. Revo rushed from one to another of the children, wagging his tail. He scrabbled in the beach, sending sand flying. As they scampered about, squealing with excitement, the sea startled them by running up and then retreating. With a hiss, Revo barked at it. Old Mother had been to this beach before. She remembered that there was a cave big enough to make a home and sent the children off to look for it. The children ran up and down the long beach and clambered up the rocks, peering in every crevice. Nimue found an old nest with broken eggshells in it. Maroo found a little cave just big enough for a child to sit in and watch the changing sea, but no good for a home. It was Otak who discovered the cave. A narrow entrance opened, but in a wide, high chamber, bones and a broken shell necklace told them that people had camped here before. The children were sent up to the cliff top to gather armfuls of heather for bedding. These were arranged around the main area and covered over with skins and furs. A chilly breeze was blowing, but the encircling cliffs kept the bay warm. The children took off their boots and trousers and ventured timidly into the sea, gasping with the cold shock as the sea ran rippling around their feet. They scampered back up to the beach as the wave retreated. They ran to meet the next one. This time the water did not seem so cold. They paddled deeper. Nimue shouted, "Look! People!" She was pointing out to sea. They all stared. Two dark heads had appeared above the waves. As they watched, another bobbed up beside them, and then another. A reg came and squatted beside the children. "They are the seal people," he said. "Call them a greeting." Otak called and waved his arms. Nimue copied him. The seals bobbed with the waves, but made no response. "They are coming nearer," said Maroo. The children began to wade out up to their knees. The sea sucked sand from around their feet. The seals moved gently away. When the children went back to the beach, the seals drew nearer again. All that day the seal people watched as the families worked on their home, making it warm and secure. Sometimes a bolder one would come close to the shore so that they could see its broad, whiskered face and mild, round eyes. But as soon as anyone went near it, the seal would disappear under the water to re-emerge farther out. The next day, Vorka sat engraving a seal on his bone amulet, while the others made necklaces. Maroo knew that the cone-shaped whelk shells brought good luck. She helped her mother collect tiny ones to make a necklace for the new baby. The beach was full of different shells. Maroo found tiny pale pink fans, long brittle shells like flat pieces of bone, dark blue mussels, and spiraled cones. They could be arranged in endless variations to make rings for wrists, necks, and ankles. Sticking to the rocks, the children found ridged conal shells that would not come off. Oreg said that they were limpets. He knocked one sharply with a stone. It fell off in his hand, and they saw that it was not just a shell, but a living creature. It was good to eat, Oreg said. The children soon learned to dislodge the limpets by themselves. They took them to Old Mother, who soaked them all day on a shelf of rock halfway up the cliff, where a freshwater stream ran down. The next day, she sent Maroo to fetch water in the stag head bowl and put the limpets in it. Then she pushed her cooking stone into the base of the fire, and when they were hot, dropped them into the bowls to cook the limpets. They tasted good. The children collected them eagerly, day after day, and never tired of them. Most days, the seal people bobbed in the waves just out of reach and watched them. The men could not hunt the seal people. The sea was desperately cold, and they feared and respected it. They did not swim and had never learned to make boats. There was plenty of varied food to be had on the shore: limpets, winkles, and crabs, and hares and lemmings on the cliff top. Maroo liked to lick salt from the rocks. The woman scraped it off and used it to flavor the cooked meat. They gathered seaweed and cooked it with the hot stones, and picked berries and green shoots growing on the cliffs. It was now high summer. Although the sea breeze blew fresh, the sun was hot, and the people were able to take off their heavy furs and wash in the rock pools and bask in the warm, sheltered beach. They laughed to see each other's white bodies contrasted with the dark, weathered, reddened faces and hands. One hot day, Otak and Maroo took Revel and went exploring farther along the rocky part of the beach, where they found a deep, large rock pool. The children lay on their stomachs on the rocks and gazed into the pool. There were tiny crabs in it, transparent shrimps, and a sea anemone waving its little sinister arms. Suddenly, Revel splashed into the pool, scattering the wildlife to the stony depths and barking joyfully. The children shrieked with laughter. Revel swam to the other side, jumped out, and shook water all over them. Maroo wanted to swim like Revel. She leaped into the pool and drew herself forward, but her legs sank. Otak threw a stick into the pool, and Revel dived in again, splashing Maroo as he retrieved it. "See!" exclaimed Otak. "He fetched it. He could fetch small animals for a hunter, and he could help track the game. His nose is better than mine. Remember how he sniffed out those voles yesterday? Maroo stood up in the pond, streaming water. Let's tell father, she said. Oreg and Vorka were sitting together on the beach. Vorka was making a necklace for Nimue, and Oreg was binding a new head onto his spear. The children explained their ideas while Revel frisked beside them. Vorka, as they had expected, could not see the need of it for a dog, and even Oreg laughed and said, "A hunter will be better off without that dog of yours. Look at him. He's just too jumpy and he barks too much." Maroo's spirits drooped. Oreg saw their disappointment and relented. He put down his spear. "Revel must learn to be still when you command him, and he must learn not to bark," he said. He showed them what to do, pushing the dog's haunches down and commanding him to sit. Revel did not understand. As soon as Oreg took his hand away, he leaped up and put his paw on Oreg's chest and wagged his tail. The children laughed. "He will learn," Oreg said. The children set themselves to teach Revel. They soon had a little success. Sometimes Revel would sit when they commanded him. Often he would not. But they were certain that he understood, even if he could not always obey. Stopping his barking was more difficult, but Otak knew that a dog that barked was no good to a hunter, and he was determined to stop it. He would smack Revel's nose when he started to bark, and reward him with tidbits of food when he was quiet. Oreg watched the training with approval, but the other men were skeptical. They thought Oreg was indulging the children. The summer reached its zenith and began a gentle decline. Sometimes when Maroo sat daydreaming in her tiny cave halfway up the cliff, the sun would beat so hot upon her that she would take off her fur jacket, but when she stepped out of the cave, the wind would strike cold again. Several times Maroo saw her mother stop what she was doing and breathe deeply. The baby would soon be born. Tikek chose a place at the back of the cave and made it cozy with layers of heather and a pile of furs. Tikek was ready, but the baby did not come. They waited day after day, but although the babies kicked impatiently, it still did not come. Autumn was advancing. There was a chill in the air, and the sea looked restless, echoing the mood of the people who knew that they should be on their way to the autumn hunting grounds before the long cold set in. Tikek knew this too, but she would not move now. With her place ready and the knowledge that the birth was near, the time came early one morning. The baby had not moved for a day, and that night Tikek said, "It will be soon." Toward dawn, Old Mother roused everyone and sent them away, all except Avni. The men climbed up the cliffs, taking Revel and the children with them, to look for tracks of lemmings and seabirds. But Maroo left the others and went to sit in her own little cave overlooking the cold, gray sea and sky. The sun was sleeping still below the sea, and only the faintest gray light hovered over the horizon. Maroo looked at the paling stars, noting their positions. She knew the names of all the stars and their movements, but not the significance of their positions at the time of the birth. Old Mother understood those things and would know what the future held for a baby born at this hour. The stars faded as light crept across the sky. The cliff came alive with the rustling of birds and voles. Maroo could hear the faint sounds from below. Old Mother and Avni talking, an occasional moan from Tikek. She listened intently. She longed to know what it was like to give birth. In a few more summers, she might be part of the mystery herself. The rising sun flashed on the sea, and the golden light spilled over Maroo in her little cave. At the same moment, the quiet was split by a wild calling from the throats of Avni and Old Mother, telling everyone that the baby was born and was alive. Maroo sprang to her feet and slithered down the cliff, determined to be there first.